And I want to welcome up Tony Mahar, the CEO of the National Farmers Federation. Tony comes from a farming background in southwestern Victoria and has worked in and around agriculture for the majority of his working life. He's experienced in working with global food manufacturers, major Australian agribusiness and the Commonwealth Department of Agriculture. He was appointed the CEO in 2016. Please make him welcome.
Thank you, Dan. Great to see everyone here in this theatre again. Thank you for joining us today and sharing the journey that we've been on since 2017-18, and we look forward to being with you on the journey towards 2030 when we can hopefully reach our target of a $100 billion industry, which I'm going to give you a bit of a run through today. So most of you will have seen our $100 billion journey, which is going to come up any minute, I know, the next slide. It continues to be the guiding light for us. As Fiona said, we started this discussion a number of years ago, but it really is much more than the $100 billion goal. Yes, it's the headline, and yes, it's the grab that everyone has subscribed to, thankfully. And we are, Fiona said it, we're excited, we're delighted, we're proud that we have been able to put this vision out there, and the initiative, the vision has been accepted and supported by all political parties, institutions, the industry, importantly our members. When we decided to do this vision, it was from the national peak body, of which there is only one, but that body is made up of members, and it is absolutely critical that we took and brought the members along the journey with this, because it's our collective vision and our collective objective to reach that $100 billion target, which the slides are there. So it's much more than the 5 pillars, and I'll go through the 5 pillars, but just a brief check-in. And it is right that we have a check-in. When we did set this in 2018, we were conscious that what we didn't want to do was to develop this report, put it on the shelf and then let it sit. We were absolutely committed to checking in every year and reporting against the objective, which was very aspirational. Some people thought that it was too aspirational, some people thought it wasn't aspirational enough. So we thought we probably got it about right. But when we set it, the farm gate value of the industry was around about $58 billion. And now we look at the value of the industry, and the farm gate value is around about just over 80 billion. So in 4 years or so, the industry has leaped ahead $20 billion. That's quite an achievement if you think about what we've gone through in the last 3 to 4 years. As Fiona said, in 2019, when we first reported on this roadmap, we're in the midst of a crippling drought, and I remember sitting in the chair there just wondering how the industry was going to recover from what was a once in a lifetime, once in a century drought. And here we are, how ironic, 4 years later, $80 billion, $20 billion better than where we started, but we're facing crippling floods. And that is the nature of Australia and the nature of Australian agriculture, I know, but it is worth reflecting on the journey that we've been. So if we reflect that the industry has kicked up that extra $20 billion, some of you might have heard me say this before, but if we get things right, we're done in 2026. If we keep another $20 billion, we can pack up in 2026. We've reached our $100 billion goal. I suspect it's going to be a little harder than that, but we should keep trying. Now, so what I'm going to do is to take you through the pillars of the roadmap. And Fiona touched briefly on 2022, and perhaps even prior to 2022. But if we just reflect a little bit on what's happened this year, Australian agriculture has always been volatile, always been dynamic, always been unpredictable. But I suspect this year it's taken another step in that direction. We've seen conflict in the northern part of the globe, which I think has or had us and continues to have us on the edge of our seats, wondering when that conflict's going to come to an end, hopefully. We've seen the floods that Fiona alluded to. The rain just keeps coming, unfortunately, and talking to many farmers, it's been devastating. And I am struck to be really candid and really frank. When I've talked to farmers who have had a lot of their crops and things wiped out, the ongoing optimism and resilience is still there. You know, I've talked to many farmers that said, look, we're pretty well done for this year. We're wiped out. But next year's going to be good. Next year, you know, and that is the eternal optimism I think is in Australian agriculture, and we're just going to keep nurturing that. Fiona alluded to the supply chain fluctuation, so whether the input costs, fertiliser, fuel, chemical, you know, getting containers, getting shipping out through the port. So the disruption in the supply chain has been quite significant, and we have seen an increased focus on things like food security. So things that we perhaps in this country have never had to really face before, disruptions, and whether it's $12 lettuces and, you know, many jokes about that. But the disruption to the food supply chain is something that I think will go down as a takeaway for me for 2022 and the previous years. And let's hope that it smooths out a little bit. So, again, I'm going to take you through a bit of a snapshot of the 5 pillars. And for those of you, Dan alluded to it before, but there's a QR code on the brochure that you've got there. And please, if you've got a chance, have a look at it. It is a report card of how we're tracking. I'm going to give you a bit of a snapshot of it. But we are committed to reporting against this roadmap every year because we want it to be a living document. We want it to maintain its momentum, maintain its relevance. And so today is about reviewing, checking in, monitoring and reporting back against how we've gone against what has been a successful initiative for us. So we look at Pillar 1, customers in the value chain. We are lucky in this industry. I've always said that we have great support from the community and from consumers. People trust what Australian agriculture does, and we have to not take that for granted, but we have to nurture it and we have to nourish it and don't take it for granted. But we are in a good position because the community does like agriculture largely. There's obviously some biosecurity threats that have been facing this country this year, particularly with foot and mouth disease and lumpy skin disease, but we have got some biosecurity funding from government. And we're also, and I'll touch on this a little bit later, but the Australian Ag Sustainability Framework, so that's the bottom tailwind there, that has really been a promising light for the industry in terms of recognising and rewarding farmers what they do every day in terms of managing a landscape. So that sustainability framework is really important. There's some of the things, some of the achievements that we've seen this year. Some of the challenges, of course, foot and mouth disease, biosecurity, lumpy skin, varroa mite. Unfortunately, it is an increasing threat to our industry. Biosecurity underpins everything that farmers do every day. Infrastructure, Fiona alluded to the roads, which is just devastating in many parts of the community. And market access, export-orientated industry, there are some of the challenges that the industry is facing in terms of disruptions to international markets. So a quick overview of the tailwinds and headwinds in Pillar 1. Pillar 2, I alluded to the natural capital, the Ag Sustainability Framework and biodiversity, another sort of like-minded term, which we think has been really positive this year in terms of the development of some of these biodiversity markets and schemes and certificates. So that, I think, bodes well for the industry in terms of value. Obviously, the climate change space and funding for methane, which has been a topic of much conversation this year. We think that there are some significant opportunities and some value there for the industry in terms of its challenge to grow, but to grow sustainably. The threats, again, Fiona alluded to, there's a couple of issues we've got with the new government. They have been outstanding in terms of engagement and willingness to listen to NFF and our membership. But there's a couple of issues that we need to keep talking to them about. One of them is, of course, water buybacks in the Murray-Darling Basin and some of the commitments around renewable energy and what that might mean for farmland. So a couple of challenges there in that space. Innovation continues to be both an opportunity and a threat. We've certainly got a lot of improvement that has been made in regional connectivity, but Having said that, it is still very much an issue. Many people in the audience will be familiar with some of the challenges in rural and regional Australia, and we're grateful for our partnership with organisations like Telstra and NBN to actually help address some of those issues. So there is some good work going on in that space. And we need to actually, from a headwinds point of view, we actually need to keep innovating. So we've got Ag Innovation Australia, that's what that AIA stands for in there, but we still don't really commercialise the innovation and the R&D that goes on in this country well enough, would be a general statement. So a couple of tailwinds, a couple of headwinds there. People and communities, ongoing issue. People are our best asset in agriculture. Sadly, we are still struggling to find enough people to get into the industry and keep into the industry and maintain a career path for them. So people is or are an ongoing issue. The new government, again, is one of these issues where we're committed to working constructively with them, but they do not support or didn't support the ag visa that we had been developing as an industry for a number of years, and they've put faith in the PALM scheme, so the Pacific Labour Scheme. That will be a challenge for us. We'll have to keep making sure that we get the appropriate level of workers and resources in here to harvest crops and plant crops. So people and communities is a major challenge, and in some ways one of our Achilles heels. The last pillar is capital and risk management. So I alluded to the dynamic in a good way, but volatile perhaps in a bad way, nature of the industry. And risk management, in my mind, remains one of the real challenges for the sector. While we're dealing with natural disasters like floods, we've had fires, I imagine the next drought can't be that far away. And again, it seems crazy to say that when large parts of the country is in flood. But in terms of risk management for a volatile, dynamic, constantly evolving and unpredictable industry, I feel like we need to continue to work at risk management strategies for the industry. So it makes it easier when land values are maintaining their high rate, and that we've got a future drought fund that is a long-term sustainable funding source to help us as an industry work with government to address what will, I'm sure, be the next drought on its way. And also we'll talk today, Rod Sims has got a great speech, I have to say. I read it previously, and I'm really looking forward to Rod talking about competition law reform, because that's an ongoing issue for farmers. A large number of small producers competing against a small number of large processors or up the supply chain. So look, that was a really quick overview of the 5 pillars. I've probably touched on some of the tailwinds towards 100 billion. It hasn't all been the NFF, sadly, that's made the $20 billion leap from 60 to 80 billion. There's been a couple of good seasons in there, which also which helps the commodity prices, land values. Digital connectivity continues to allow farmers to take advantage of technology, be more efficient, and also alluded to some of those environmental markets, which I think, if we get it right, can deliver value to farmers. The headwinds, probably touched on those, labour, biosecurity and environmental regulation. There's 2 sides to that coin when I talk about biodiversity and natural capital. EPBC implementation, for those of you that know anything about that, is something we're watching really closely. So that was a really quick overview of what is a detailed report card that, if you get a chance, download or have a click on the QR code and have a look at the report card. It is hopefully a comprehensive snapshot of where we've come in the last year, but you can also reflect back on the last 4 years. We're absolutely committed to that $100 billion vision. We thank our members and our partners for helping us progress it. And with, what are we got, 7 years to go before we get to 2030, let's hope that we bridge that $20 billion gap in the next 7 years. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Tony. And some of the points that really stuck out there were, well, particularly 2026, you might be able to pack up and go home in 4 years' time on this trajectory. At first instance, I wonder, what have been the lessons from the last 4 years in getting to this point, and what sort of impact have they had on the next 7, 8 years?
Yeah, there's probably been a few lessons. Hello.
There you go. Sorry.
A few lessons. I mean, it's I think Fiona alluded to it. The $100 billion target is something that everyone agrees to and accepts. It's some of the detail into. I think I counted before. There's 63 different actions in the roadmap. So there's 5 pillars, but we're really careful to make sure that we had specific actions in there, Dan, that we can report on and we can check ourselves in on, and importantly. Delegate some of those responsibilities to, because we always knew that we weren't able to do this by ourselves. It was always a real partnership type of approach. So there'll be some organisations that are better placed to actually progress some of those actions. So I think that was probably one of the takeaways, is that we've put this vision out there, but we really do need to link arms with all of our members to get and partners to get some of these things done.
One of the points that Fiona made was around telling the story and being out there in the community, having this conversation. Why is that such an important component of 100 billion by 2030?
Well, I think it's easy to take food and fibre and agriculture for granted. So the commitment to A, reporting on the roadmap, but B, continuing to talk about it and check in and review the progress is really important, because COVID was a really good example. Agriculture was one of those industries that we really focused on the importance of food and fibre. As food shelves, supermarket shelves became scarce, farmers were out there sort of doing that job. So we have to constantly remind ourselves and remind the community of the challenges that are there, but also what a great industry it is. So this roadmap is really instrumental in allowing us to do that. We've got the headline, got the 5 pillars, but there's a number of actions under there that we can keep checking in on.
You mentioned at the time when this was drafted and being formulated, Australia was in drought. We're now in floods, and I want to acknowledge the difficulty so many Australians are facing, particularly farmers right now. You alluded that perhaps we're not too far away from the next drought, which is the cyclical nature of Australia. How does a strategy and a vision like the 2030 roadmap sit amongst the very changing and volatile nature of our nation?
Yeah, so we have the $100 billion vision, but we're very cognizant and aware of, as I've said, the volatility in the industry. So, the prices at the moment, the last couple of years have really, and the season have really driven the farm gate value. But we know, clearly when we set this, we were in the middle of a drought. So we understand very clearly that there are going to be fluctuations in seasons, fluctuations in markets, whether that's China or any other market. Again, to be really candid, the threat of foot and mouth disease that has never been as close to this country as it is now, I think was a really stark reminder of some of the threats the industry faces. Now, by luck or good management, we've been able to keep it out and other diseases out. People sometimes forget about the varroa mite. That's sent a real scare through the industry in New South Wales. But those sorts of challenges are really not far away. Threats are not far away. So we're really cognizant that we face those threats. We're doing everything we can to work with government to reduce them. But we're not far away from a devastating flood, fire, drought, disease incursion.
One of the other challenges that you raised there was around labour supply. That's one of the issues that the members of this building are grappling with across sectors in Australia. I suspect that there's no silver bullet, otherwise we'd probably already be there. What do you see as the measures that need to be taken to deal with this bigger challenge?
There's definitely not a silver bullet, unfortunately. Someone used the term recently, a silver buckshot of shotgun approach that it's required. So the measures, I think, are a clear understanding of the urgency in this building, and we've been strident in our views to this government and the previous government around the urgency of labour, and it's not going to be solved just by immigration. We do have to continue to develop and communicate career opportunities in the industry for domestic, for Australian workers and for graduates. So we're doing little things like Ag Career Start, it's a gap year for people on farm, to get people that might not have experienced agricultural work to, it's a small gesture, a small initiative which we think needs to be expanded. So some of those things, recognition at the high level, a number of small programs that help sort of build the awareness and try and eat the elephant one piece at a time.
We'll be hearing from Lucy a bit later on, who's one of the graduates in that very program. Right now there is a really massive conversation happening here about industrial relations reform, whether or not that mammoth bill should be split, and I know that Senator Pocock is certainly calling for that. What's the NFF's position on this major reform?
We think that it does need to be delayed. We think that it is such a significant piece of legislation that we haven't had the time to consider it in detail because of the ramifications, not so much directly on farm, but because of the nature of our supply chain. It could have significant ramifications and disruptions to the supply chain, the nature of processing, food processing or transport, logistics, retail. It could have significant consequences that we haven't been or had enough time to adequately consider. So it is an omnibus bill. It is a number of pieces of legislation that is being proposed to be put through Parliament. So our view is that it needs to be split. We need to have more time and we need to understand the implications. So that's been our advocacy efforts to government and also to people like Senator Pocock.
Is that the entire bill you want delayed, or are there components that could be moved ahead if in fact sittings are extended in this week and next?
Yeah, so it looks like sittings will be extended, I think, and there are parts of the bill that we are supportive of. Some of the social aspects of the bill we're very supportive of. So, we don't think the entire bill needs to be held up. Our proposal or our idea is, and I don't think we're alone in this concept, is to split it and give industry a little bit more time to understand and to work cooperatively with unions. I mean, we have, some people in the room will be familiar, we've joined with Minister Watt, who after the Jobs Summit, a joint tripartite working group between government, unions and industry representatives to try and address some of the labour issues. So we're very open-minded and very constructive and optimistic about addressing some of these challenges, and I think the IR bill is just one of those challenges that we need a little bit more time to be constructive and cooperative to make sure that we get it done.
Well, I reckon we're going to be hearing a lot more about that in the days ahead. I just want to open up and see if there are any questions from anyone in the audience that has got a burning question for Tony. If you want to throw your hands up, I think we've got a microphone coming around, or no, maybe. Yes, here we go. Just here at the front.
Hello.
There you go.
Hi, how you going? A quick question. You mentioned you've got some fantastic partnerships, and you do, and you're doing some wonderful things. But in relation to the 63 action items, what in particular are you actually working on with partners? Or have you identified those actions with the partners and have asked them to come to the party?
Oh, it's a good question. So we're probably many of them. Some of them where, so the telecommunications is an obvious one for me. Things like the data code, so working with Telstra, with NBN Co, on things like better services for rural and regional communities. The Ag Career Start, which is like, as I said, a gap year, an apprenticeship of sorts for many of the partners and members are working with us on those sorts of things. So it's probably across a number of the actual actions. So there'd be a few.
It would be great if you could highlight them.
Sure.
Yeah, against your action points of who's collaborating.
Which partners?
Yeah, that'd be great, and it'd be great for the partners too.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Good suggestion. Thank you.
And we've probably got time for one or two more questions just here at the front.
Thank you. I'm a very small-scale producer in Canberra. I would like to know what amount of farmgate sales from urban agriculture are forming part of your 100 billion target?
It's a good question, Fiona. I don't have an answer, I'm sorry. What percentage of the value comes from urban agriculture. I'll have to try and get back to you on that. I don't have a figure of what that is.
Thanks.
And I think we've got
Hopefully growing.
yeah, maybe growing with the this roadmap as well.
Pardon the pun.
Tony, just interested in any more that you can provide to us around telling our story. I look at, we've just been at COP27. The methane conversation's a really interesting one. Our neighbours just to our east have chosen punitive taxes as a way of chasing something where there's a much more optimistic way around technology to deal with. Yep. I feel like there's a lot of conversations coming our way. You talk about the trust of the urban people and the broader community. Just interested in any comments about how we take that trust, lift that story, really ensure that we bring the Australian public with us and don't end up like New Zealand or Sri Lanka around inputs, or the Netherlands around livestock numbers. Really important conversations, but just keen to hear how you're thinking about that.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And it's a bit of a help me out with the previous question. Actually, that's the NFF has an initiative called Telling Our Story. So that should have jumped immediately to my mind. For some reason, it didn't. But it's a collaboration between NFF and a number of our partners to actually communicate all of the great things that are going on in agriculture. So if you haven't had a look at that website, it's a multi-million-dollar campaign that organisations like Nutrien and Meat and Livestock Australia, Woolworths have actually been able to commit to partnering with the NFF on that, to actually tell our story around, yes, sustainability, yes, innovation, yes, what we're doing around, some of the technology that's in the industry. So it's an initiative that we would love to get more support for because it is an ongoing challenge. Again, so whether it's at United Nations climate change conferences that are held every year, or whether it's everyday social media messaging that we can get out about our industry, it's one small initiative that we would love to ramp up a little bit more, because there is a need, Mike, to take advantage of and nourish and nurture the position that Australian agriculture is in with the community, because you're right, in New Zealand or in the Netherlands or a number of other countries, farmers, for whatever reason, or agriculture, not being run out of town, but it's facing challenges by governments and the community. So we can't take that for granted. So that's a nice little reminder of the Telling Our Story initiative.
Can I just pick up on that part of that question around COP27? What impact did that have on your thinking about the role of Australian agriculture in this global climate change discussion?
Yeah, so it was a bit mind-blowing to go to the climate change conference. They're a little bit like the Olympics. There's every country, every stakeholder in one small region all talking about the same thing, but incredibly important, Dan, for Australian agriculture to be there and to actually articulate, demonstrate and tell the story of what's happening in relation to, yes, climate change, but more broader sustainability, because we do have a good story to tell, and there has been lots of innovation. And going back to the Telling Our Story initiative, I don't think as an industry, I think it's an opportunity for us to actually get better, get more coordinated, get louder about the great stories that we've got. So we did that in Egypt, along with Forest Products Association. We partnered with that sector to actually try and tell that story and make sure that we were shaping the conversation, being part of the conversation. The last thing we wanted was for these talks to be held in all around the world and for agriculture to be sort of talked about and not have farmer representatives and farmers around the table to actually be part of the conversation and shape the conversation. So it was a long way to go, but important that we are part of the conversation. That's certainly the commitment that NFF has made across a whole range of things. Let's be part of the conversation, let's shape it so it, we get a say in what it looks like.
Yeah, I think being part of the conversation is crucial. Just to round us out, what are you hoping that everyone gets from this leadership summit today?
I hope we get to reconnect with some of the issues, the roadmap itself. It is, a vehicle for conversations. It does allow us to actually have a whole range of conversations. Again, there's 5 pillars, 63 actions, about 32 metrics in there. So it's a good framework. Sorry to use that word, but it's a good conduit for a conversation. So I hope that people, by attending today, get a little bit of renewed enthusiasm about the roadmap, certainly get a clearer picture on some of the things that the industry is facing, both challenges and opportunities. And we walk away with a feeling of collaboration and commitment to reaching that $100 billion goal, getting that extra $20 billion. And I'd love for any bright sparks in the audience to start giving us some ideas about what we do post-2030. As we get closer to 2030 and we get closer to achieving the $100 billion vision, what's the next light on the hill? What's the next uniting goal for us as an industry to collectively work towards? I'd be really interested in any thoughts that people have about that.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much. I'm hoping we hear some of those today, ladies and gentlemen. Tony Mahar, CEO of the National Farmers Federation. Thank you.